Second half certainties, we think of life as the first half, and then you get in your second half, you have 40, 50, you're in the second half of the game. And the thesis basically is that the older we become, the less certainties we have. Because life just has a way of squeezing the certainties out of us, as you know, guys. I mean, when I was young, when I was 25, I had 100 certainties. I was certain about a lot of things. Now I have about a dozen. But what's beautiful is the certainties I have today, I'm more certain of than any other time in life because they've been tested, they've been tried. And so I did the teaching today. It's going to become a book. But I did the teaching today because I think it's very healthy for somebody that's been down the road to then mentor people like you, Matt, that and say, let me tell you what's ahead.
Right.
And let me tell you, you're going to put a lot of effort in a lot of things. But if you do, let me kind of direct your effort to make sure you put them in some of these certainties that are going to really give you a great return in your life. And so we talked about 13 of the certainties today.
Give us your favorite.
Oh my gosh. Probably the one I would be known for the most would be everything rises and falls on leadership. I think when I went down my certainty list, when I said that, everybody said, "Well, that's John. That everybody knows that's who I am. That's what I know." I think my favorite maybe is intentional living is the best way to maximize your life, and I think it's my favorite because if somebody would ask me. They would sit around the table like we are right now, guys, and they say, I really do want to get the best out of what I have. I would say to them, then you better immediately begin to live an intentional life. Don't accept life, lead life. Be intentional in it. Don't wait for good things to come to you. Become intentional in the areas that are going to make a difference. Because intentional living takes good intentions and it turns it into good actions.
Right.
And good intentions, as we know. I mean, everybody has good intentions, but that has really nothing to do with success at all. I mean, it's kind of like everybody's had an idea when they're in the shower, but it's the person who comes out of the shower and dries off and implements the idea that really gets the return on it. No, nothing happens without action. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so,
give us yours. Give us what you intentionally do every day that you may not feel like doing, but you've pre-decided I am going to do. Fill in the blank.
Well, I'm going to add value to people. That would be number one. I'm just going to intentionally add value to people every day. And what
does that look like every day? I mean, is that we know what you do publicly, but let's say on the day you're not speaking somewhere, how would you add value to somebody on that day?
Oh well, first of all, every time I go into my office and start writing, I'm not going to be able to speak to them today, but I'm writing words that they're going to read. So I'm intentionally adding value to. I'm doing something. I'm taking an action, although I'm not interacting individually with like you today, Matt. I'm taking action on something that's going to add value to you tomorrow. So when I talk about intentionally adding value to people, there'll be days when I honestly would hardly see anyone, maybe except Margaret if I'd be at home. But I'm still intentionally adding value to people by either my writing or working on my lessons, or I'm intentionally adding value to people because I have a phone list of people that for example, I have a list of names on my iPhone of people that have expressed that they would like for me to share with them about God.
Right.
And so I take that out. Not every day, but I take it out 3 or 4 times a week and look at one of the names and call them and intentionally. Here, one of the things I love about intentional living is if you're going to live intentionally, you have to think intentionally. And I think this is to me, the real secret of living intentionally is that I begin to think on the front end. See, you can either think on the front end or you can think on the back end, but here's the difference. If thinking on the front end is 10 to 1 more important than on the back end. How many times have we finished something and said, oh man, I wish I would have done that. And why didn't I think of that? Well, you didn't think of it because you didn't think on the front end. And so I think the secret of success of intentional living is that it causes us to do intentional thinking on the front end. I mean, so that when I get into the podcast with you, and we're talking to all of our listeners and all of our people that watch the podcast, all of our friends, we can really help them. We can really help them because, when you said this, my podcast is a content podcast. That's why I listen to it. I listen to it because of your content. And by the way, Chris, you do take the complicated, make it simple. Yeah. But you do it one more. There are some people who can take complicated, make it simple, but then you take the simple and make it applicable to a person's life. They not only now to take complicated and go simple means I understand it. To take simple and take it to application means I do it. And so you have two steps, I think, and I think that's your secret sauce. If somebody said, what's Chris Hodges do better than anybody I know, I would tell them he takes complicated, makes it simple, then he takes simple and makes it applicable to a person's life. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And then one of the things that you did for me, because you've been mentoring me for almost 20 years now. And
beautiful 20 years.
Well, it has been, and honestly, and I can't say thank you enough and tell you how much I love you.
Yeah, I love you too.
I deeply love you.
Precious friend.
But one of the greatest gifts you gave me is being able to think it on the front end and even write it out. And one of my favorite teachings that you have is that rule of 5.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, my favorite book of yours is Today Matters. I've said that for 20 years. It's just because it helps you make every day a masterpiece. And when my days that were intentional, that weren't really producing much, I can get a little discouraging when you know you're doing the right thing and you're intentional about doing the right thing, but you didn't see a whole lot of fruit from it. But now I'm kind of 40 years into the process now, and you have that compounding effect of doing that rule of 5 every day. And that's what you helped me with. You helped me make a day a masterpiece, but not have the expectation of it being what I was hoping on that day. Let it compound over years. Unpack that. Because honestly,
I would love to unpack that.
Seriously, if people say, "What's the greatest thing John taught you?" You taught me how to be intentional by making every day intentional and a masterpiece. But I mean, I have my rule of 5. I have the things that I do.
Of course you do.
And I think it's just now paying off. Honestly,
I'm so glad you really brought that up. Honestly, Chris, because I think you talk about secret sauce. First of all, John Wooden mentored me and had a great impact on my life. And he's the one that said, when opportunity comes, it's too late to prepare. And his whole thing was, and what is that? That's thinking and acting ahead of the opportunity.
Right.
It's getting ready. In fact, I asked him one time, of course, he was such a successful coach at UCLA, and I asked him, I said, what do you miss most about coaching? Oh, he said, practice, the practice sessions. I said, okay, pull that out for me. Oh, he said, John, he said, in the practice sessions, we could do the basic things and practice the basic things that would help us win when we played the game. And he told me something very interesting. He said, so I was challenged with the practice session because I knew if we practice well, as you practice is how you play. He said by the time the game came, and if you got to be old, but if you're old like I am, John Wooden, who was this incredible coach, would literally sit on the bench and he would cross his leg and he'd hold a program in his hand and he basically watched his team play like this. I mean, almost like a
spectator.
A spectator that really came to the game, but they really don't care what happens. It's just like, I'll watch the game. And he told me, he said, the game was already a foregone conclusion. And so it was from him. Now let's go, because this is, I think, huge for your podcast players. He taught me that work has to be stored up before it shows up.
Oh, wow.
And if you don't store it up, when it comes time to show, you have no show and tell at all. And so he taught me, he said, and that's where the compounding comes. In the beginning of whatever we do in life, we're doing a lot of good things, but it doesn't show up. And you just say, wow, I don't know, should I keep doing this? And sometimes because it doesn't show up, we quit. But he said, no, you just stay with it, and it's stored up. And then one day, it starts showing up. And then it begins to show up, and people say, wow, how did they know this? And look what they're doing. It was my father who said, he had another way of saying it, and he taught me when I was 17. I said I was going to go in the ministry, and he said, well, then, John, you never have an empty well. And I said, what do you mean by that? He said, well, you got to fill the well. You got to be able to go over and he said, you got to have a full well so you can take your bucket when you need it and go and get that water. Well, you do an awful lot of storing up before you get the privilege of even putting the bucket in the water to take it to show up. And I think the miss is that for so many of us, if it doesn't show up, we get discouraged and we say, well, and what's sad is about the time the compounding is about to give you the return, about the time the well is full enough for you to begin to pull water out of it, is sometimes we quit right before we were about to have the abundant harvest. And you know, like I say, when you can afford to quit, you can't afford to quit.
Yeah, that was Jamie's story today. It was amazing.
Oh, wasn't that great?
Yeah, I don't know if our listeners know who she is, but Jamie Kern-Lima, who created this cosmetic brand, had hundreds and hundreds of no's as she was trying to create this business out of her home. So many times she could have just given up on her dream and quit. And of course, ultimately ends up selling her business to L'Oreal for $1.2 billion.
Yeah, it worked out.
That's a B.
With a B.
That's a B. In case you thought you didn't hear right.
And then became the first female CEO of L'Oreal, but how inspiring it was, you know, to hang in there. It was just fantastic. We're going to get to our listeners some of this content, especially the 13 things that John taught about these second half certainties. John, the one on the list that I don't think I've known you longer than everybody else in that room, and I know it's a value, but it surprised me when it was on the list, because this is the first time I've heard this talk of this second half certainties, and it's the fourth one, and that is everybody needs forgiveness, so forgive.
Yeah.
It was a beautiful moment, my friend.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
And I know you. After you said it, I know why he said that, because of the way our culture is right now. It is so, you're one and done. They'll write you off so fast, and people are carrying so many grudges and bitternesses and canceling. And unpack this one for a little while. I think it would bless our listeners just to hear your thoughts on this one.
Well, first of all, it's just not fair. It's not, the social media is not fair. Every one of us have done stuff that social media could blow up on negatively. I mean, there's no person. I mean, let me just start here. Haven't we all said something stupid? I mean, I'm 75 and I still say stupid things. I mean, and to not be able to have grace and forgiveness and a little bit of room for humanity and a willingness to say, well, yeah, that was a little stupid thing John said, but I say stupid. You know, it's kind of like when I'm not unforgiving to you, it's almost like I'm perfect. And so I feel, in fact, you could tell in the room when I started this, and I really, because I didn't have a time to do it, I didn't really get to unpack it correctly or probably like I would have liked to. But what I ask people is very simple. Has there ever been a time in your life where you really needed somebody to forgive you? And have you ever felt that perhaps they didn't forgive you? And how did that make you? Because I've had a couple times in my life where I asked forgiveness and I wasn't forgiven. And I felt clear in my heart because I truly meant I wanted to be forgiven. So you know what? When you have done everything possible, but the person on the other side doesn't release you from it, it hangs with you. It hangs with you, and you kind of want to redouble back and say, well, I wonder what else I could do, or maybe I didn't explain myself right. Maybe I need to go back again. And you carry unnecessary weight with you. I can also think, I remember a time David Jeremiah was a very close friend of mine when I lived in San Diego, and he preached a wonderful message one time of which I took notes on. It was a great message. He's a great communicator. And probably a couple years later, I wrote a book, and I had taken the message, but I had carelessly, wrongly, not put down where I got it. And I put it in my book. And I'll never forget, we'd have monthly lunch just because we had good friendship. And he brought the book one day. And honestly, I thought, oh, he brought my book and he'll want me to sign it. You know, and he brought the book and said, John, he said, do you mind if we could, this might be a little bit of a hard conversation. And then he told me, and immediately when he told me that I had put in something, that I didn't give him any credit. I wasn't trying. I just had humanly forgot. I didn't give him any credit and say, I got this from David, the whole process. And I felt terrible. I remember how bad I felt. And I said, David, how can I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. And what was so beautiful is he looked at me and he smiled and he said, I know that you didn't do this intentionally, and you're totally forgiven, and we'll never talk about it again. And I remember how I just felt a whole weight come off of me. And that drew me even closer in my friendship to him.
Sure.
Because he was so kind to me and he was so ready to say you're forgiven. And so when I say everybody needs forgiveness, to forgive everybody, I need forgiveness. There are times, I mean, and what a fool I am to think, even at 75, that I'm not going to have to go back to, maybe it's to Margaret, my wife. I mean, hello. But, and look at somebody and say, you know what? I was wrong there. I missed that.
Right.
Would you forgive me? And the moment I taught that, certainly today, you could feel in the room, everybody in that room either needed to forgive somebody they hadn't forgiven, or they needed somebody to give them forgiveness.
Right.
It's just, I forget the writer. He was so famous. But he wrote at the capital city. Ernest Hemingway.
Yeah.
And he tells about Paco, who in his son and the father had a bad relationship, and the son went home, and they lived in Madrid, and the father couldn't handle the fact that that he and his son were strained in the relationship, and so he put in the newspaper, Paco, meet me tomorrow at noon at the fountain at the square. All is forgiven. Love, Dad. And the next day, when he went to the square, there were 700 Pacos that showed up.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, isn't that the way it is? We either need to be on the I'm forgiving you side, or I need to be forgiven.
That was actually one of the powerful moments, too, in Jamie's story, as she talks about one of the business executives that she pitched to that she had great respect for. She had actually thought she had closed the deal. She was right up to the moment. And they said, we love your product, but the answer is no.
Yep.
And she said, can you tell me why? And he goes, well, if you really want to know the truth, I mean, you're asking for it, but if you want to know the truth is, you don't have the right body figure.
Yep.
And you don't look the part to be a beauty executive or the owner of a cosmetic company. You know, I don't think the clientele is going to receive from somebody who looks like you. And I was expecting her to have a little bit more different side of this story, how, she had to work through bitterness and anger and forgive over. And I think what makes her such a remarkable leader was she immediately did not let that land in her heart.
Yeah, that's right.
She talked about she had that knowing on the inside of what she was called to do, and we even talked about it at lunch afterwards, how she has this ability to not let it land. I think one of the problems with a lot of the leaders today, John, and the reason why they don't lead so well is they're letting too many things land.
I do too.
And it's a louder voice than the knower on the inside. So they've allowed the outside voice, even voices they've never met before, define who they are, help them think who they are, and they're not letting the thing they know by their own creator define who they are. So they're letting this other voice, this outside voice, dominate that calling, that surety that is in their spirit. And I've said this in our Q&A session, that if I could wave the magic wand and give leaders one quality, it would be that security, that certainty of their lane, their assignment, their calling. I call it my portion. I know my portion. I don't covet anybody else's portion. So when somebody criticizes me, that's fine with me. I know what I'm here to do. Speak to that a little bit, because I thought that was a powerful part of our day.
Well, first of all, when we did the Q&A, I loved your phrase, my portion. I had not heard that. But you put it in the context, I have a portion of gifts and the calling that God has given me. And, I said one time, it was a great day in my life when I realized that my calling wasn't subject to a conference call. I don't need the rest of you on the call to kind of validate what God has already told me. God has told me in that whole process. But when she gave that illustration today, I thought she had hundreds of no's over a period of about 8 years.
Yeah.
Just no, hundreds of no's. Now here's the part. So let's talk about your example of the guy who says you don't have the right body fit for this. If she takes that and lets that land personally in her spirit, which creates all kind of bitterness and anger and all kind of negative emotions, here's what I say. There are enough no's in life that we cannot control. that cause weight to come into our life. What we don't want to do is add weight to our life that we can't control.
Right.
And if she would have begun to take those things personally and that rejection personally, it would have weighted her down. She would have never had the strength to get to the end because she was in an endurance marathon. She wasn't doing a 100-yard sprint and 12 seconds later we all can go have something to eat. She's in a marathon. If she takes those rejections and those negative thoughts to her, if she takes it personally, she's not going to have enough weight. She's already going to have a lot of no weight on her. And we can't afford to put more. And so here's what I say. Only carry the weight. Don't add to your own personal weight. Only carry the weight that you have to carry as a leader because you are out in front and you do get those blows and you do get those hits. That makes sense?
Absolutely.
So, but don't add to that weight. And what I loved about her is she had that ability not to let it land, forgive, move on, and not let it control what she did next.
Yep.
Well, she even asked a question, which I think is a great just evaluation point for any leader. Study how you respond when you're rejected.
Yeah.
When somebody rejects you, study how you respond.
That was good,
to it.
Matt.
And if you'll dive into that, that'll make you a better leader. Because if every time it's, I can't stand them, I'm writing them off,
Yeah.
I won't talk to them anymore, it affects the way we lead people.
I'm thinking about this a lot right now because of the lunch you and I had just yesterday with Dr. Sam Chan.
Yes.
And he told us that according to the Pew Research, Harvard Institute, Lifeway Research, that over the next 6 years, if there are 300,000 churches in America, 100,000 of them, 1/3 of all churches are going to lose their primary leader, either through just quitting, retiring. So while we're over here at Highlands College trying to supply the Great Commission with leaders of competence and character, we're actually having hundreds of thousands of
A deficit.
We're in a deficit. And it's very, very concerning, and a lot of it's for some of these reasons that we're talking about. And one of my favorite points that you made, it was number 8 of your 13 certainties, was that your perspective becomes your world. And I think people have lost perspective today. I think they've completely lost perspective of their calling, of culture. Help us with that. You're the best in the world at perspective. Help. That's a powerful one. Your perspective becomes your world.
Well, I think it's a fact. That's why two people can be side by side and live in two totally different worlds. Because what you see is what you get. And so what I see it becomes my world. And it becomes reality to me. And one of the things I learned a long time ago is the fact that we have the ability to choose our perspective. So when you live in the wrong world, it's because you made the wrong perspective choice. You determined to have scarcity instead of abundance. You determined not to be forgiving and keep score versus travel light and turn the other cheek and walk and so whatever our perspective is, that puts us in the world that we have. And so when people come to me and they tell me the fact, well, there just aren't very many opportunities today. I mean, I look at them and I say, you're right. You're exactly right. As long as you live in that world, there are not very many opportunities to you. How do you change? You change your life by changing your perspective.
So good.
So when somebody says, I want to change my life, the first thing I know they need to do is that they're thinking wrong. And the greatest gap between successful and unsuccessful people is their perspective. That's the greatest gap. And we all live in the same world, but we don't have the same world that we live in. And that's a perspective issue.
We're out of time.
Let's go. I wish we could keep going.
It's very true that we're always anxious to improve our circumstances. We're always anxious to fix the things around us. But so many times we're not anxious to improve ourselves and fix ourselves. And so the whole teaching of this is that when we start in life, you probably started off like I did, and that is with goal setting. And well, let me just tell you a story. Kirk Campmeyer, when I was in my early 20s, asked me what my plan for growth was. And the bottom line is I didn't have a plan for growth. I didn't know that I was supposed to have a plan for growth. He was the first one that kind of made me aware that, John, growth's not automatic. If you're going to grow, you have to grow intentionally. And So I said, okay, I'm going to grow intentionally, but I didn't know how to grow. I mean, no one ever, it's one thing to ask yourself if you have a growth plan, but I didn't have a growth plan. And I went to my friends and asked them if they had a growth plan, and none of them did. And so I desperately began to say, well, how do I grow myself? How do I develop myself? And so I brought something very personal to me today because I'm holding in my hand where I started my growth plan. This is the dynamics of personal goal setting, and it's Personal Success Planner, and it was by Paul Meyer, Success Motivation Institute. And this is where I started. This is my first. I paid $799 for this. Okay, and when I paid $799 for this, that year I made. I started off as a pastor. That year I made $4,800. So this was huge. This was a lot of money, and I had to save up for it. I didn't have that kind of money, and so really 6 months of trying and saving, we finally got to this. And so this is where I started. And it's just very important. It's very special to me, but I started my personal growth plan with a goal-setting teaching. And it's got cassette tapes in here, and it's got workbooks, and I worked it through, and I really went through this personal growth plan 3 times. The first time I got it, I went back to get some more, and it took me, so I went through it 3 times. But the reason I brought this with me today is for a couple of reasons. One is this is when people say, what's the best investment you've ever made in your life? The best investment I ever made in my life is right here. The $799 I paid, which was an awful lot of money for me, the $799 I paid has been worth millions of dollars for me. The return is incalculable. And the reason I say that is because I'm going to challenge you in a personal growth way to invest in yourself. In fact, if you wouldn't invest in yourself, why should anyone else invest in you? I'm always amazed at people who want me to scholarship them. Could you kind of give me a free lift? And my whole process, no. If you and I don't bet on ourselves, why should anyone else bet on us? The first bet that I ought to pay is on myself. And so this is my first kid, and so I brought it with you today to say that I literally started my whole growth life, goal setting. And isn't it interesting? I'm talking to you about how do you and I leader shift? How do we shift from being a goal setter to a person that just really works on growth? Because here's what I realized when I started in my growth plan. What I realized was this: the goals I achieved were not as great or as important as the growth that I was receiving in my life. That yes, I was setting goals and I was stretching towards those goals, and it was a good thing, but there was something happening internally to me that was more than places I wanted to go and numbers that I wanted to reach. And I experienced 2 what I call growth changes that I want to give to you. Because I think that when you get on a growth journey that's intentional, you'll discover these same changes also. And the first one is very simple, and that is that I went from growth in everything to growth in essential things. When I started off with my growth, I just said, well, I want to learn everything. And so I just read and studied and listened to tapes, and I just did everything I could to grow. And I was just grow. And one day it hit me that was never going to get me to where I wanted to be. That I had to go from trying to grow in every area and everything to grow, get essential. What are the main things that you just need to grow in? Now, for me, in my 20s, I came to the conclusion that if I could be successful in relationships, if I could become successful in training and equipping people, if I could have an incredible attitude that would help me be an overcomer, and if I could learn to lead and increase influence, if I could do those 4 things, relationships, equipping, attitude, leadership, if I could grow in those 4 areas, then I probably could be successful. And so I committed that these are the areas I'm going to grow in. And so I began to eliminate a lot of stuff so that I could grow in what I would call, for me, the main stuff. And I would say to each one of you in all of our sites and here locally that what you've got to do is when you start your growth plan, becoming intentional, you got to ask yourself, what are the areas I'm going to grow in? You can't grow in everything. You don't even want to grow in everything, but you got to grow in the essential things. For me, REL, relationships, equipping, attitude, and leadership. And later on, I added communication because I knew that I would spend my life as a connector and a communicator. And because I am a person of faith. And pretty much for 40 plus years, these have been my 6 essentials. Learning how to connect with people, learning how to train, equip others, having an attitude to help me overcome, learn how to lead and expand influence, learn how to communicate well, and then become the person of faith that I really want to become. This is where I really spent my time. The second change I had in the area of growth was I went from growth with a timeline to growth without a finish line. Now, this was an amazing experience that I had because when I started my growth journey, I thought in terms of, well, okay, there'll be a finish line somewhere. There'll be a time when I've accomplished that. There'll be a time where I have achieved this. There'll be a time where I have arrived. And so I had a timeline out there. And I heard Earl Nightingale say that if you spent an hour a day, every day, on a certain given subject, now that's back to the essentials, REAL, that stuff. If you spend an hour a day, every day on a certain given subject for 5 years, you could become an expert on that subject. Now, that really excited me because at this time I'm falling in love with leadership. I'm buying into the idea everything rises and falls on leadership. And so here we go. I'm excited, and I said, okay, I'm going to spend an hour a day, every day for 5 years to become an expert on the subject of leadership. And that's what I did. Now, back then, there were not a lot of leadership books out. They were mainly management books. If you go back in the 70s and 80s, you go into bookstores, you didn't find leadership books. You found management books. And so I read some management books, and it kind of got me going in the right way. But I would talk to people that were leaders. I would try to do leadership experiences an hour every day. And every day, every week, as I would go through this process, I'd ask myself this question: how long will it take? Well, Earl Nightingale said it'd take 5 years. Well, I'm not only reading and studying and learning and experiencing. Guess what else I'm doing? I'm counting down. I think I'm Mr. Cape Canaveral. And I'm going, 5, wow, 4, 3, and I can smell it. It's out there. I'm getting close. There's going to be some light in this tunnel pretty soon. And I was about halfway in this 5-year run of countdown until something happened. It wasn't anything I read. It wasn't anything that somebody came and sat beside me and mentored me on or kind of gave me some thoughts or advice. About halfway in this journey, the inside of me switched. I was receiving so much value from my personal growth. I was learning so much about leadership. I was growing so much internally that I stopped counting. And I left the question, how long will it take? And I picked up the question, how far can I go?
I love coming into your life daily for just a minute to, give you an uplifting thought that will help you maybe with your day. That's what Minute with Maxwell is all about. Sherry Hall from Queensland, Australia, listens to us and watches us every day. She gave me the word intentionality, and Sherry, that is one of my truly favorite words. And the reason it's a favorite word of mine is I believe if someone said, give me a word that's going to help me be successful, I would almost say, intentionality would be in my top 10. So somewhere I would say, if you want to be successful, you have to be intentional. And the reason for that is life doesn't give us its best when we wait on it. In fact, I teach everything worthwhile is uphill. Well, the only way you can go uphill is to be intentional. Now, if you're going downhill, you don't have to be intentional at all. Coasting takes no creativity. It takes no mental energy at all. But intentionality, what happens is if a person said, I really want to improve my life quickly, I would say become intentional. Wow, you see, most people, they accept their life. They don't lead their life. And if you accept your life, to be honest with you, you're going to accept whatever comes to you. That's not the way you want to live. You want to be intentional. You want to go after the important things of life, not hope that they find you somewhere. Being intentional means that you know what you want. And when you know what you want, it means that you have to have intentional thinking before you have intentional doing. So it begins with how I think, that concludes with what I do. Here's what I know, Sherry. You know this, I know this. We want all of our Met with Maxwell people to know this. The only way that you can climb the mountain that you have to climb to be on top of the mountain you need to be on top of is to be intentional. Nobody ever accidentally went to the top. You've never read a book on accidental achievements. You got to be intentional. Thanks for giving us the word all the way from Queensland, Australia. My name is John. Glad you're with us today on Minute with Maxwell.
If I could come off the stage and have a personal conversation with each one of you. And if I ask you if you wanted to be successful, everybody in this room would say, absolutely. That's why you're here. That's why you registered. That's why you paid money. But if you and I could take that success conversation and expand it, and I ask you to tell me what you thought success was, in a crowd this size, I would promise you there would be probably 2 or 3 dozen different answers, because success can be very subjective. I would like to talk to you about it today. I've studied the subject for 30 plus years. I've tried to ask questions of successful people. I've tried to talk to them, try to discover what made them successful, and kind of find out what they think success is. This is a success symposium. This is a day that you've set aside, I've set aside to kind of be more successful and get our act together and hit our potential and climb a new level. That's why we're all here. And I think it would be maybe good for us to take just a few minutes and kind of have as a settling point and as a starting point what success is. I think success, first of all, is knowing my purpose in life. As I have watched and observed successful people, what I have discovered about them is they really have figured out why they're here. They really do have their act together. And knowing their purpose in life is a stability for them. So that when everyone else is rocking and rolling and things are a little unsteady and people are kind of leaving the ship and people are kind of abandoning their causes, these people, they hold steady right throughout the storm because they have a true North Star. They truly are focused. It becomes an anchor in their life that just holds them steady. And the anchor is a confidence based upon a knowledge of purpose. Someone said that there are 2 great days in a person's life: the day that they are born and the day they discover why. I'm here to tell you, highly successful people, they've discovered why.
So in my Power of 5 for writing, I do 5 things. Every day I read, every day I think, every day I file, every day I ask questions, and every day I write. I do that every day. I've done that today. Every day I read, think, file, ask questions, write. Every day, read, think, file, ask questions, write. That's the power of 5. Those are the essentials for me to be an author and to write 86 books. Every day I read, think, file, ask questions, write. Every once in a while people say, well, John, what do you mean by every day? Well, what I mean by every day is every day. What part of every day do we miss here? Every day. And because I read, think, file, ask questions, write every day, I become a prolific author. People say, oh my gosh, it's amazing what you've done. Well, it's not really amazing what you've done if you understand the power of 5 and the essentials, the everyday essentials, and you just do them on a consistent basis. Now, the reason I'm giving you all of this background is because I want to talk to you about the power of 5 of intentional living. We've already discovered that everything worthwhile is uphill, and so the only way that we can ever get to the things we really dream about, the things that are important to us is we have to be intentional in climbing that hill. And I'm going to give you now the power of five, the five, what I think are the essentials in your intentional living that will really allow you to be very, very successful in life. Again, if you really want to know more about a lot of this, I wrote a book called Intentional Living. You can just get it, and it'll really underline, underpin, and fill in kind of some of the missing blanks that I'm going to give you in your life. So, but let's get started. Here are the five. Here are the five essentials for what I when I sit down with people and talk to them about intentional living. And by the way, if I only had an hour with you, which is kind of like what I have, and I could only talk about one subject with you that would help you be successful, this would be the subject. So let's get started. Number one, you want to be intentional in your personal growth. That's where it all begins. It's where it all began for me when I was in my 20s and I was sitting down having breakfast with my mentor, Kurt Kampmeyer, and he asked me what my plan for personal growth was. And honestly, I didn't have one. I didn't know I was supposed to have one. I'd graduated from college. I was loving what I was doing. I was working hard. And for the first time in my life, somebody walked in my life and said, John, you need to have a plan for personal development and growth in your life. And when I realized that I didn't have one, and he realized I didn't have one, he said these words that were life-changing to me. He said, John, growth, you're speaking about personal growth now, it's not automatic. In other words, it doesn't just happen. Now we're right back to intentional living. Remember, if you're going to go uphill, it just doesn't happen. You have to make it happen. You have to be intentional. If you want to coast downhill, that just happens, okay? You can go downhill without intentionality. You can go downhill without thinking. You can go downhill without doing anything. That's why so many people love downhill. They just don't like the downhill return and results. So that day, when he said, growth is not automatic, that was life-changing to me. He encouraged me to get a personal plan for growth. Now, I didn't have one, didn't know I was supposed to have one. I went to, probably for the next, 6 months, I would ask, when I was with any of my friends, I'd ask them, do you have a plan for personal growth? And none of them had a plan. None. I didn't have one friend that said, oh, yes, let me give you my plan intentionally, things I do every day that help me grow and become a better, bigger person. No one had one. It was then, after a few months, I began to realize this is a big miss for a lot of people. And so I began to work hard on developing a plan for my own personal development and growth. If you want to know more about how you personally grow, I wrote a book called The 15 Laws of Personal Growth. And if you just get the 15 laws of growth, trust me, it'll share with you the meat, the essentials for you growing in your life. But for now, it's just very simple for me to say that the personal growth intentional plan that I put myself on in my 20s for 50 years has served me well. In fact, if somebody would come and walk into my life and say, John, how did you get where you are? How did you become the person that you are today? I would say it was developing an intentional plan for personal growth that literally changed my life. Now, one of the things that's important as I began to develop my plan for growth is I realized that I needed to be in what I would call a positive growth environment. And interestingly enough, I wasn't. The group that I was with, it wasn't a positive growth environment. I don't mean this unkindly, but that wasn't a priority in their life to see their people develop and grow, and there was no plan for it. And so in my 20s again, I sat down and I wrote down what I'm about to share with you that, again, is life-changing because I said, okay, I've got to develop an environment. I've got to create an environment where I can intentionally grow every day. And I came up with what I want to share with you now. What does a positive growth environment look like, okay? What's interesting is I wrote this in my 20s and I've never changed it. Now, that's not true with most of the stuff in my life. I'm constantly evolving, changing, learning, tweaking, growing. In fact, my life is constantly adjusting hopefully upward, but it's adjusting for sure. But the 10 things I wrote down when I was 26, honestly, they're still the same 10. So let me give you what a growth environment looks like. And I think this is kind of exciting for you at Heartland, because as you begin to say, how can we grow our people? This is the kind of environment that you want to provide for your people. And by the way, this is the kind of environment you want to provide for yourself. I didn't wait for my organization to provide it for me. I sought out people that would allow me to have this kind of growth environment. So let me give it to you. Number one, a growth environment is a place where others are ahead of me. In other words, just quite simply, I'm not number one in the class. I'm not ahead of the class. Because what I've discovered is that when you're at the head of the class, you stop growing. You start growing and you start telling other people how to grow. And they're all watching you, and you become the teacher, and pretty soon you've lost your edge. So if you're at the head of the class, to be honest with you, you're in the wrong class. And what I intentionally do on a consistent basis, even today in my 70s, is I put myself around people that are bigger than me, better than me, faster than me, smarter than me. This is life-changing, my friend. This is life-changing, because I only stretch when I have somebody in front of me. The moment that I'm in the front, instead of stretching, I just kind of start standing and telling other people what to do. You don't want that. So a growth environment is a place where others are ahead of me. Secondly, a growth environment is a place where I'm continually challenged. Every day I have a mountain to climb. Every day I have something before me that either I haven't done, or I haven't at least done it well yet, or it's something that perhaps is new that I've never faced, but I'm challenged every day. I put myself in an environment that challenges me. You need a mountain to climb. You don't want to wake up in the morning with a yawn. You want to wake up in the morning with a gulp, like, oh my gosh, look what I got accomplished today. That's what you want. A growth environment number 3 is a place where my focus is forward. It's all about where I'm going, not where I have been. I learned a long time ago, you never leave something, you always go to something. And you've got to keep something out in front of you. And whenever I'm talking to people, I'm always asking them the same question: what's in front of you? What's in front of you? That's a very interesting question. What's in front of you? Do you have something in front of you that again is going to stretch you? And do you have something in front of you that you're looking forward to? Number 4, a growth environment is a place where the atmosphere is affirming, where there's just an encouragement, just in the environment. Encouragement is the oxygen of the soul, and it's so important to be around people that believe in you, be around people that want you to be successful, that want to add value to you, and you want to do that, of course, to them also. Number 5, a growth environment is a place where I'm out of my comfort zone. We all love the comfort zone, but the problem is the comfort zone isn't good for us. In fact, I think one of the pluses in COVID-19 was the fact that it got everybody out of their comfort zone. Everybody's out of their comfort zone right now. In fact, that's why they keep asking the question, when are we going to return back to normal? What they're really asking is, when can I get back into my comfort zone? And first of all, we're not going to return to normal, and you're not going to get back in the comfort zone that you knew, that's for sure. But the point is that everything you want, everything I want, and everything I need, but I don't have it. I want it or I need it, but I don't have it. Everything you want that and need, but you don't have. Can I tell you something? It's outside of your comfort zone. That's why you don't have it. If it was inside your comfort zone, you'd go over and get it. You'd be comfortable getting it, and hey, no problem. But because it's out of our comfort zone, sometimes we have things that we either want or need and we don't get because we don't want to get out of the box. We don't want to climb over the fence. And that's one of the, I think, the advantages of COVID is it knocked everybody out of the comfort zone. And I say, while you're out of your comfort zone in your box, boys, do some things you've never done before. Try some things you never tried before. Learn some things. You know, a crisis is a detour, and I say take the detour tour and really maximize that whole process for you. Okay, so you know, if I'm in a growth environment, I'm outside of my comfort zone. I'm very careful that I keep friends around me that challenge me, ask hard questions, encourage me, press me to do things that perhaps I've never done before. I really have to be careful to make sure that I'm around somebody that's always pushing me. And I try to push my friends, and so we can stay out of that comfort zone. Number 6, a growth environment is a place where you wake up excited. In other words, you can just hardly wait to start your day. Wow, okay. This is personal, okay? My name's John. I'm your friend. If you're not going to wake up excited, why wake up? I mean, do you want to wake up bored? Do you kind of want to wake up and do nothing? I mean, the only way to live is to live a life of excitement. And so, you know, when people say, John, do you motivate your people? I have 7 companies. Do you motivate your people? And no, not really. We try to hire motivated people. My job isn't to pull you along and say, okay, it's going to be okay. And you know what I mean? Set your alarm for you and kind of prop you up and, you know, kind of get you going. You know, I know people that they're always getting ready to get ready. You know what I mean? They just don't ever seem to get going. Well, if you're in a good growth environment, there's an excitement about what you're doing and who you're doing it with. And that's what really keeps me going. I mean, people say, John, why are you still working? It's because I'm still excited about what I'm doing and how we're doing it together with the team and the people around me. And we're making a difference. We really are making a difference. And that's what you want to have in your life. You want to have a anticipation and excitement when you get up. Number 7, a growth environment is where failure is not your enemy. It really isn't. Wow. In fact, as I think about failure not being your enemy, I think we've really made a mistake about failure and success. I think we have done this wrong. I think we try to separate success from failure, and it's kind of like be successful, don't mess up, and success and failure belong together. Success and failure hold hands every day. And they hold hands because, honestly, they make each other better. When I fail, I learn from it. And this is huge. And so many times I watch people who they want to avoid failure, and I say, no, I'm not wanting to do wrong. I mean, it's not like failure is the highlight of my day, but failure is the highlight of my learning. I have learning lunches all the time with successful people. Every month, I've done this for 40 years. Every month. Take somebody to lunch, buy their lunch, ask them 7 questions. One of the questions is talk to me about the greatest lesson you've ever learned. And I can tell you 100% of the time, I've done this hundreds of times around the world with hundreds of people. And when I ask them, tell me about the greatest lesson you ever learned in your life, every time it has failure in it. Somebody says, well, let me tell you what I learned when I failed here. And that's the value of failure, what you learn. Success and failure should be together. And so a growth environment is a place where, you know, failure's not your enemy. In fact, you learn from it. It really becomes a friend. You're testing, you're failing, you're learning, and then you're improving. That's the way it works. Number 8, a growth environment is a place where others are growing. In other words, you're not the only person developing and improving your life. Everyone else is. And now growth begins to be contagious. I can still remember, I referred to this earlier, the fact that when I was creating a growth environment, I was in an organization that was not conducive for growth. And I can remember after I began to grow myself and kind of pull myself out of that environment and find an environment that was conducive and encouraging me to develop myself. I remember going back and seeing the people I used to be very close to and were my friends, and wow, I mean, we did life together. And within 15 minutes of conversation, I realized that we weren't the same, and that their world was not my world. And I still cared for them as people, but I also realized I can't go back. You see, once you begin growing and developing yourself, you just don't go back. You don't go back because you learn and explore and experience things that you would have never learned, explored, and experienced. Number 9, a growth environment is where people desire change. Again, just like failure is not their enemy, change is not your enemy. When I was a young leader, I had a mentor named Olin Hendricks who sat me down for lunch one day, and his whole teaching time that day at lunch was growth means change. In fact, he said it's impossible to grow without change. So don't fear change, embrace change. Let growth take you to places you've never been and experiences you've never had in your life and people that you've never known. But you know, if you grow, you're going to change. That's part of the process. And a growth environment embraces change. Wow, let's get better. Let's improve. Let's do better. And then finally, a growth environment is a place where growth is modeled. In other words, you have other examples of growth around you. And I like this, it's also expected. We expect our people in our John Maxwell enterprise to grow, to develop, to get better. That's just an expectation we have of all of us. It's an expectation I have of myself, of continually learning and growing. And that's what keeps us vibrant, and that's what keeps us alive, and that's what keeps us becoming the person that we really want to become, because we keep expanding ourselves. And so I just challenge you big time, to become intentional about your personal growth, and ask yourself, what am I doing every day to help me get better? I close this part by saying, the only guarantee, this is huge, the only guarantee that you have that tomorrow is going to get better than today is that you're growing right now. It's the only guarantee. If you're not growing today, why would you expect tomorrow to get bigger and better for you? Everything happens when we are in the personal, intentional moment of growing ourselves right now. Be intentional in your personal growth. Now, I shared with you that the power of 5, there are 5 areas that you want to be intentional in. And by the way, I'm going to stop just long enough to say, as you're taking notes, have you put any A's in your notes section yet? I mean, something, okay, I got to go apply this. I've not done this. I need to take action on this. Have you had a C there? I mean, is there something I've said today you say, oops, I think I need to change in this area. How about, is there something that I've taught you today that you say, this is so good, I've got to pass this on to my team. I've got to teach them. Be marking your notes as we go. ACT. What am I going to apply? What am I going to change? What am I going to teach? Number 2, the second vital area of intentionality is to be intentional in your attitude. I wrote a book several years ago called The Difference Maker, and The Difference Maker book is about attitude, and basically the thesis is this: attitude isn't everything, but it's the main thing that'll make a difference in your life. And the reason I say attitude isn't everything is because I run into people who think attitude is everything, and it's not. It's not. Let's get real here for a moment. I mean, you have to have competence in your work at Heartland, don't you? I mean, I know you, I want you to have a good attitude there, but you have to have competence. I mean, I suppose you could have just a great attitude and be incompetent, Then when you're fired, you just have a great attitude about it. So, well, woo, I freed up my calendar. Woo, I suppose that we really don't want to live in that Disneyland, do we? Attitude, you have to have competence. You want to have some experience. Attitude isn't everything, but what I do know is this. It's the main thing. And it's the most common separator between people who excel in their life and people who don't excel. I mean, just think about it for a moment. If you're about to hire two people and they were just equal, I mean, they were equal in experience, they were equal in ability. In fact, it was a toss-up. I mean, which one do I hire? But there was only one difference. One person had just a terrific attitude, a can-do spirit, whatever it takes, and the other person has a very poor or bad attitude. Now, just simply, hello, this won't take long. Who are you going to hire? You're always going to hire the person with a good attitude. It was the difference maker. And so when I talk about being intentional in your attitude, I'm just saying to you and to me, to all of us today, that you've got to adjust your attitude. Attitudes don't stay good. And so, there's times when I got to go in and adjust my attitude and tweak it and say, okay, John, let's change our thinking a little bit here. And I think maybe the most important thing that I can say about attitude right now in this part of the teaching is that your attitude is a choice. Now, this is huge. You choose your attitude. By the way, that's why I never feel badly for people who have a bad attitude. And because they have a bad attitude, I don't really work hard on trying to help them. Hello? If you've got a bad attitude, I didn't give it to you. Heartland didn't give it to you. Your spouse didn't give it to you. You gave it to yourself. It's a choice. Many, many years ago, Margaret and I were... I was leading a conference, and we were in a Q&A, and Margaret joined me for the Q&A, and I said, just ask us questions. And the first question, somebody looked right at Margaret and asked her, she said, does John make you happy? Now, when she asked that question, in fact, I never quite figured out why the question came because it was really a leadership conference, but it's okay. Does John make you happy? I thought, oh my, this is a good question because I thought I was an amazing husband. So when she asked, does John make you happy? I'm kind of saying, oh, okay, well, tell him, Margaret, and I'll never forget, Margaret looked right at this lady who asked the question and she said, no, he doesn't make me happy. And immediately, the air went out of the room. Everybody's kind of looking and, oh, what's happening? And I'm saying, looking at her, and I'm saying, what's happening? And so this is so fun. So I looked at her. I said, Margaret, explain yourself. You got to explain what you meant when you said I don't make you happy. And she said, okay, no problem. Now let me stop here before I share with you what she said. Have you ever asked anybody to explain something? And so they did. And as soon as they explained something, you wish you wouldn't have asked them to explain something. Oops. The first was oops. This is oops. This is not going where we want it to go. So she said, well, sure, I'll be glad to explain this. And she looked right back at the audience and she said, in the first 6 months of our marriage, I realized John would never make me happy. Now, I don't know if you've got the gift of discernment, but we're going downhill very, very rapidly right now. And then she said, this is life-changing. And then she said, because for the first 6 months of our marriage, that's exactly what I expected him to do. Make me happy. And she said, we were just starting off in our careers and she was teaching school. She'd say, I would finish school and I think, boy, tonight we'll have dinner. And then John would call me, and he had an issue come up, and he was going to have to work late, and so we didn't get dinner that night. Or he'd come home, and I had to grade papers. And she said, we just found that there was stuff. And I kept saying, well, tomorrow John will make me happy. Well, okay. Well, maybe tonight, or this weekend John will make me happy. And she said, after 6 months of waiting for him to make me happy,
She said, I had a wake-up moment. I had a maturity moment. And here's what she said. After 6 months, I came to the conclusion the only person in this world that can make me happy is me. Period. End of story. And then she said, now, the moment that I became intentional, the moment that I determined that I would be in control and choose my happiness, she said, John has added immeasurably to my happiness. That was close, wasn't it? Okay, finally got out of that one. I'm adding to her happiness, but I'm not making her happy. She makes herself happy. I just try to add to it. And that's what you need to understand about attitude. The attitude that I have right now, the attitude that you have right at this moment, is the attitude that you chose, that I chose. That's a fact. Nobody gave it to us, and we're not going to find anybody that can fix it for us. We have to fix it ourselves. And the good news is, attitude, which is the difference maker, which is so important in your life and my life. Well, let me tell you what the good news is. The great news, this is better than good news. The great news is, without a doubt, because it's a choice, you can change it right now. See, if I ask you to change your giftedness or your skill set, that may be possible, but it would be a lot slower. But when I say you can change your attitude overnight, you can go from a bad attitude to a good attitude. It's a choice. Now, you have to be intentional with it. It's uphill all the way. And if you've had a bad attitude, you've been doing downhill traveling, and all of a sudden you got to go uphill here. So there's going to be a lot of changes, and you got to be extremely intentional. But the good news is you can. And what I'm sharing with you today is if you'll become intentional in having a good attitude, it is life-changing for you, and it's life-changing for others. Number 3, we're giving you the power of 5 of intentional living right now. Intentional in your personal growth, intentional in your attitude. Number 3, be intentional in your purpose. I want you to find your purpose, and then I want you to fulfill it. You know, there are 2 great days in a person's life, the day they're born and the day they discovered why. When you discover why, you've discovered your purpose. So people ask me all the time, they'll say, well, John, how do I find my why? How do I find my purpose? How do I discover it? And there are 2 ways to do it. One is about 80% effective. The other is 100%. That's for sure. So let me give you the 80% route first. When people say, I want to discover my purpose, I ask them, what are you passionate about? What do you really, truly love? Because whatever you're passionate about, what you really, truly love, most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, that'll take you to what your purpose is. We're fairly wired to love what we're good at. So you always go to your passion first, because passion gives you great energy. And so you just go down the passion path and see if you find your purpose. Now, let me just say this. Sometimes you'll go down the passion path and you'll find that isn't what your purpose is. And I just tell you that let me give you the second way to find your purpose, and then let me put it together. Passion is the first path you take. The second path is what are my strengths and abilities? Where am I gifted? Everybody has strengths, abilities, and giftedness. You got to discover what you're good at, because here's what I know. This is 100% correct. When you discover what you're good at and start doing it, you're doing your purpose. That's just a fact. And now, what really is beautiful, and it happens most of the time, doesn't happen all the time, is that people, what they're really good at, and if you're passionate about what you're really good at, now you're going to have energy for life to excel, and that's your sweet spot in your purpose. Now, when we were talking about passion a moment ago, if you're passionate about something but you're not good at it, then you're in trouble. Don't make it a career, because you'll never like your work. You don't want to do that. And your work will never be effective because you're not good at it. I tell people, if they're passionate about something they're not good at, make it a hobby, not a career. One of my hobbies is golf. I love to play golf.
And so I'm very passionate about it. Just enjoy the game. It does something for me that basically nothing else does. So I love to play golf. That's the good news. Bad news is I'm not really good, okay? As one fellow told me one time when we were playing, he said, you only have one problem. I said, oh, I can solve that problem. If it's only one, hello, that gives me hope. I said, what's my problem with my golf? He said, you're too close to the ball after you hit it. Okay, that's a problem. Okay, but I love the game. I love the game. It's a hobby. It's not a career. Why? Because I couldn't make any money playing on the golf tour. I can't even get on the golf tour. They won't even let me on the golf course. Okay, but when you find out what you're really good at, your strength, and if you're passionate about it, wow, all of a sudden you're cooking there. And so, but you want to be intentional. You want to find the reason you want to find your purpose is that fulfillment is found in your purpose. When I look at a person and they lack fulfillment in their life, almost, well, I don't know, 90% of the time, I look at them and I say, I know what the issue is. You just haven't found your sweet spot in your purpose yet. Because when you do that, you're just fulfilled. I've never worked a day in my life. I love what I do and I do what I love. In fact, somebody asked me the other day when you're going to retire. I said, I'm not going to retire. I love what I do. I don't have any desire to retire. I mean, why would I retire? I mean, I'm adding value to you today. This is what I do every day. I add value to people. I teach. I write. I come alongside. I become their friend. I try to lift them to a higher level. I mean, why would I stop doing that? Just because I have enough money to stop, or just because I have everything I need? I mean, could I stop? Of course I could stop, but I don't want to stop. Why? Because I'm still in that sweet spot of my purpose. And I love what I do, and I do really good what I love. And so it's not even work. In fact, somebody told me the other day that retirement is doing what you want to do when you want to do it. And I love that definition. I looked at him and I said, then I'm retired. Because right now, as I'm talking to you at Heartland, I'm doing exactly what I want to do. And I'm just right where I want to be. I'm enjoying myself immensely with you. I found my purpose. So you want to be intentional. You want to be intentional in your purpose. You want to be intentional in your attitude. You want to make sure that you're intentional in your personal growth and your personal development. Number 4, you want to be intentional in your relationships. Relationships are the foundation for leadership. I teach leadership as influence, nothing more, nothing less. And influence grows in relationships. But relationships also is, I think, the foundation of joy, of happiness. I think one of the things that has been difficult during COVID-19 is the fact that we haven't been able to get together. And we are created to be together. We are created to be community. We're created to be our brother, our sister's keeper. We're created for fellowship and time. We're created to be on a team. That's who we are. And relationships are so vital. I wrote a book several years ago called Winning with People, and the thesis of that book is that people can usually trace their successes and their failures to the relationships in their lives. Wow, you can go to the bank on that. If I look at my highest and best days in my life, I can bring pictures of people that helped it become some of the best days of my life. And if I could share with you some of my failures and my biggest disappointments, I would have people in that picture too. And so when I look back at tracing my successes and my failures, it's just a fact. It comes back to, more than anything else, relationships that I have in my life. And when I teach relationships with people, it's very simple. It's very simple. And I give this to you because I want to make sure I can get to number 5, because I'm just enjoying teaching so much you. The best way to teach relationships for people is that you and I are either a plus in people's lives or we're a minus. We're either adding value to people, or, to be honest with you, we're taking a little bit value from people. Am I sowing and adding value into the lives of people? This is absolutely essential. And by the way, I think people that are minuses, I don't think they're intentional in being a minus. I think they don't realize that that they're a drag on people. I have people that, to be honest with you, kind of sucked life out of me. And I don't think they get up saying, I'd like to drag John down today. I think that they are basically selfish and they only think of themselves. And I don't think they ever get out of that world of thinking about themselves. And so therefore, I think they just live in their world and don't realize what they do to other people. But let me tell you this, if you're going to be a plus in people's lives, if you're going to add value to people, you have to be intentional because, again, we're selfish. By nature, I'm a selfish person. By nature, I want you to do something for me, okay? By nature, I want to reap more than I want to sow. A plus person has a sowing mindset. A minus person has a reaping mindset. And so you've got to be intentional. I've got to be intentional. I've got to, it's uphill. It's uphill all the way. I've got to every day intentionally work up against my selfishness and not allow that to interfere with the fact that I'm going to put you first instead of me first. And that just becomes absolutely life-changing once we do that. So you ask yourself, am I a plus in life or am I a minus in life? Wow. I don't know. Are you putting any A's or C's or T's in this section? I would hope so. I would think so. Let me give you the last one, okay? Because this is just I just want to give you one more, and this is number 5. And remember, we're talking about the power of 5 in intentional living, the essentials, everyday essentials. So every day it's essential that I'm intentional in these areas. I'm intentional. I mean, let's review just for a moment. Every day I'm very intentional. I'm intentional in my personal growth. I'm intentional in my attitude. I'm intentional in my purpose. Okay. Number 5, I'm intentional in my significance. Now, significance is all about others. When I was young, I heard Zig Ziglar say that if you will help people get what they want, if you'll put them first, they'll help you get everything you want in life. That was life-changing for me. I did a pivot that day. I was a young leader, and I was basically wanting everybody to get on my team and help me with my vision. And that day, Zig says, no, you go help people with their vision. You get on their team first. Help them. And if you help them really effectively, if you add value to them, they're going to help you. And there's a difference between success and significance. There's a big difference. I used to, Tony George is a friend of mine, and when he owned the Indianapolis 500, he'd have me come up and talk to the drivers and the owners on race day. I always enjoyed going up and being at the Indy 500 with him. And we were having lunch in his suite right before the race began. And he leaned into me and said, John, what's the difference between success and significance? And I said, Tony, I think success mainly is about me, my career, my income, my home, my cars, my stuff, what I've done for me. I said, success is pretty much kind of a me pile of accumulation. Success is about me, but significance is always about others. And that day, as we talked about the difference between success and significance, I'm saying I want you to become intentional in the area of significance, and here's why. I know a lot of successful people, very successful people, and they're unhappy and they're unfulfilled. They've got all the stuff, but their life isn't what they want it to be. And there's a reason for that. It's all about them. So I've met a lot of unfulfilled, unhappy, successful people. But when it comes over to the significant people, the people who now pour their life into others to add value to others, they intentionally are a plus and a giver to others. Let me tell you something. I've never met a significant person that was unfulfilled or unhappy. Not once. Not one. I don't know any, and I know a lot. People that are doing significant things, they're always fulfilled. They're happy. Why are they? They have joy. Why? Because they're living their life to add value to people. And every day, I live my life to add value to people. And why? Because I value people. The core of adding value, the core of significance, the core of being a plus in people's lives is the fact that you value them. At Heartland, if you want to be a plus in your organization, it's because you value the players on your team. You value the people that you're serving, your clients, that you value the fact that you're making a difference in their lives. And so I've talked to you today about intentional living.
Welcome to the Maxwell Leadership Executive Podcast, where our goal is to help you increase your reputation as a leader, increase your ability to influence others, and increase your ability to fully engage your team to deliver remarkable results.